Well, here we go. Greg Fuhrer, this has been long overdue. I'm over 400 episodes in. I don't know how I haven't interviewed you yet, but I think we were waiting for the studio, man. This is a studio. We are live from the Beratung studio. Is that what you call it? Or is it? I'm sure you have some fancy name for it.
Beratung Studios.
So, but welcome. It's an honor to have a conversation with you. And with our wealth and depth of our friendship, we could go a billion different directions. And you have so much inside of you that I want to draw out. And you're the president and CEO of Beratung Advisors, which we'll talk more about later. But I want to start really where our friendship started. And we met actually at an L3 event, maybe briefly. And you reached out to me and said, hey, let's grab lunch. I had no idea who you were. I thought, great, I'll meet this guy. And I'll never forget, we sat down at Legends on the North Side. And the first, I don't even know if you said hi. You're just like, I followed your podcast and I listened to 79 episodes in the last 3 days. I was like, is that possible? And at that moment, I'm like, man, there's something special about this guy. Talk to us about that moment. And I want to dive into personal growth, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to correct that story a little bit. You're going to remember this as soon as I say it. It was actually the first time you interacted with me was an email. And the email said, I just listened to all 79 episodes in 3 days.
Was that an email? Okay.
Can we have lunch? And you were like, is this guy for real, right?
Right.
And then we sat down lunch. As soon as we sat down lunch, it was Legends of the North Shore. So I hadn't even gone to an L3 event at that point in time. And
I just blew all of that.
No.
That's
but
hilarious.
the reason why was because my brother-in-law had been to an L3 event and told me to listen to your podcast to hear a particular speaker. And then I listened to one speaker, and then I was like, well, there's 79 episodes at that point in time. Why not over the next 72 hours? I was also, and I think you know this, I was in a really bad place in my life at that point in time. And so when I need a little bit of a something to jerk me out of that space, it's usually leadership podcast. So it came, God had a purpose at that time. But I remember, I showed up with my notebook and I immediately started asking you questions. And I remember you saying, like, a while after, tell somebody else, there was no small talk.
Yes.
It was just, let's get right down to it, right?
Which I love, man. I mean, I felt as soon as we met, man, it was like we are kindred spirits. And, man, you could see the passion and personal growth for you. Let's just get down to business. And that's actually what I want to talk about first is, man, I've been on a personal growth journey, and it's probably my number one passion in life is I want to help other people grow. Talk to us about your growth journey, man. What are some things that you've done, and what kind of started that journey in you?
Yeah, one of my mentors is actually, funny enough, this actually happened at L3 one day. A mentor of mine and I were talking. And he said, Greg, and I'm speaking in third person because this is him talking to me. He said, Greg, I've boiled it down that successful people, there's one difference. They just simply make more mistakes than unsuccessful people. And it's just like, you ever have like somebody just tell you one thing and like all time stopped and I can like close my eyes and go back to that moment? I know exactly where I was at L3 one day. I can like remember the temperature of the room. I can remember the conversation I had right before that. And I was like, wow. That's the truth. And so my journey has been a journey of mistakes. And I always like to say, like, I've made more mistakes than anyone I know. I'm sure there's somebody out there that's made more mistakes, but it's just been constant. But I look at every mistake as a gift from God. And so I made mistakes that led me up to that moment that you and I had met. But had I not made those mistakes, we would have never have met.
Yeah.
So those battle scars are gifts from God that we can learn from. And then what's awesome is once we make those mistakes, it's like touching a hot stove. You can tell me all you want not to touch a hot stove, but sometimes, and maybe you're wired differently and you just listen to rules, I got to touch the hot stove for myself to see if it's actually hot.
Yeah.
But once I touch that hot stove, I realize, holy crap, that burned. I don't want to do that again. Or maybe I would do it differently next time. And so that's really been my journey and my growth has been, let's go and try it and see if it works. So one of the things we say in our team is MVP, minimum viable product. We talk about 80%. If it's 80%, it's ready to go. And a lot of times we launch before 80%. So we're constantly trying to figure things out by doing, and we'll get a better lesson than if we sit around and try to understand.
At Indosha, we help transform visions into results. What does that mean? We often work with companies who are doing amazing things that have incredible products and services, but fail to communicate what they do properly and market themselves effectively. We passionately serve entrepreneurs, business leaders, and visionaries to see what's in their heart and their visions for the future come to life. We do that by providing fractional marketing leadership and creative execution all in one. That's what we call VCMO. With VCMO, you get a marketing director and a team of creative professionals to help execute all of your marketing needs, all for one monthly cost. How do we do all this? We do it 3 ways. Number 1, we get your vision. We get excited about your mission and your trajectory as a company and come alongside to see you go further, faster. 2, we have a team of talented strategists and creatives to get all of the work done. And 3, we flat out work freaking hard for you and your company. Reach out today. Let's start a conversation.
Back at another point in my life, I was really involved in politics. Right? I used to love politics. My passion for everything was around politics. It's not anymore. And so I would run campaigns. And I remember as young staffers on some larger campaigns and running some of the smaller campaigns, we would sit around and try to understand what the electorate thought. And I couldn't wrap my head around that somebody wouldn't know who their state representative or state senator is. Like I just literally, I thought that was like, people are making it up. They wouldn't know who the Supreme Court is. Like, come on, everyone knows the justice on the Supreme Court. So we were sitting in a room trying to understand how somebody that has 4 kids, that doesn't care about politics, what their psychology is to go into the booth. So the only way you can figure it out is by testing it. And I've tried to bring that journey into there throughout everything I've done with my leadership.
Yeah, it's interesting. Someone recently asked me when they were interviewing me for a podcast, they said, Doug, what's been the greatest source of growth in your life? And again, passionate about personal growth. I've listened to a gazillion podcasts, audiobooks, read 1,000 books. But when I really reflected on it, man, it was the suffering I've gone through. It was the failures. It's just what you're saying. And I know you have a similar passion for all of those things, but would you agree, would you say the greatest source of growth in your life really has been those failures and those hard times?
I couldn't agree more. And Doug, even just to you, you and I have talked about this around a campfire the one time. I said, you got to tell your story. And I actually told you there was a leader one time that told me they were jealous of the pain you had in your life. They were dead serious because they were like, I don't have that story.
Yeah.
But I think what they were trying to say and what they didn't understand is in the pain is where there's growth. The worst things that ever happened to me in my life have always brought. So one of the worst things that ever happened in our lives, we had 2 failed adoptions. That pain and suffering, learning to pray over the person who was trying to take my child away, that changed everything. And it brought my marriage closer. It made me a better leader. It made me a better husband. And do I want to go through that again? No. But when I look at mistakes and I look at things I would do differently, there are very few regrets I have in life because the mistakes I made me the person I am today. Yeah. And I've been reading leadership books. You know this. I actually can't tell you because before my memory, I was leading to them. And my daughter's the same way. On the way home from the hospital, she was listening to a leadership book. I don't know when her memory is going to be, but there's going to be a memory of leadership books. She actually came to an L3 event when she was still only 6 months old. We just had her at Beratung University listening to speakers, right? I, from the young age, am doing that. But that's not what led to the success. It's just a tool.
Yes.
It's just a tool. What it is applying that tool. Doug, you and I have talked about this. You had a mentor call you out that you used to read the books but not do the workbooks.
Yep.
And one of my personal disciplines is I do a book report on every book. I'm not going to spend 4 to 5 hours of my life on something and not get ROI out of it. So if I'm going to read a book, I'm going to apply the principles to it. And I'm really big on that. And I figured out how to use 4 senses. I still haven't figured out how to do a scratch and sniff leadership book. If anyone's listened to this and you go and create scratch and sniff leadership books because the power of smell is important, I will buy them. But figure out how to do it on Audible because I'm an Audible-based learner. But when I listen to a book, I'm listening to my ears. And then when I write notes, I got touch and I got sight. And then I talk to others about the book I've read. So I'm now invoking all my senses. As I write a book report, I'm continuing to invoke my senses so that I can have that knowledge of that book to where I go in the future. But at the end of the day, you only learn from that book by applying.
Yeah.
Because it's the same thing in the church world. You can go and listen to scripture from a pastor talking about a church, but if you don't go apply that in your life, it's never going to invoke what that scripture means.
No, that's so good, man. I was interviewing this guy named Chad Willardson, and I asked him something like, hey, what separates you from all the other entrepreneurs? And he just said, I think my ability to take action quicker on the principles that I learned, and I'm not afraid to undo something that I've done forever. If there's a better way of doing something, I'm going to instantly implement that. And that's just been in my head, that speed of hey, I may have been, reading books and not doing the workbooks forever, but hey, I'm going to change that right now. I'm going to start doing book reports. That ability to take action immediately is such a separator.
Doug, I have to say this. So a lot of people, when they first meet me, they have a different reaction, right? There's actually a mentor who said, to meet Greg Fuhr is to hate him. To know Greg Fuhr is to love him. And I was like, what does that mean? Now I kind of get it, right? I have a bad first impression. Doesn't matter. But one of the things that people think about me is that I will not change, right? And so we just slaughtered 2 sacred cows. That's an EOS term for the things in your company that you won't change, right? So we actually created our core values before our company ever started. And we just recently changed one of our core values. And we have a process we use for our clients that we just recently changed. And so, by the way, I follow him on LinkedIn. He's a great follow.
Yeah.
But that really speaks to me because you have to be willing to change and try things. And I think that what that mentor was saying to me is they make more mistakes. It's because they take more swings. There's a famous Wayne Gretzky saying, right? You only make the shots you take, right?
Yep.
You're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. What I see is people are so afraid to fail. And we have grace. Grace is not about being safe. Grace is about taking risks. And I think that is what there's that, what I put on a billboard. What my answer is never going to be this one, but it could be something like that, like make mistakes.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't settle well, right? So that's not my answer, but it's like, man, if we could just make mistakes, if every person could get comfortable with making mistakes, that's the beauty of capitalism.
Yeah. Well, but why don't people? Because they're afraid, right? They're afraid of what's on the other side. What if I fail? And they always, by the way, think they're going to fail. They never really think that they'll succeed. And we're going to talk about mastermind groups and the power of those, but one thing that we immediately did after we met is we jumped in a mastermind group together. We've been together for almost a decade, which is crazy. But I remember you were in the corporate world. You were working a comfortable job. I'm sure it was comfortable, but you had this dream in your heart of creating your own advisory firm, and we're actually sitting in the fruit of that. But that was a huge risk. I mean, that's no just, hey, I'm just going to leave my corporate job and do this. Walk us through that. Now, you may be prone to taking risks, but I feel there's so many people listening and watching to this that they have that dream, but they're in a comfortable job, their comfortable lifestyle, and before they know it, 20 or 30 years are going to go by, and their biggest regret is going to be that they didn't jump. What was that like for you, and what did you learn?
Yeah, so I think I am a natural risk taker, but I'm not a risk taker. I'm a calculated risk taker. And every entrepreneur I've ever met that's successful is a calculated risk taker. So there's always this, like, you get this advice a lot of times in leadership books. It's like, if you think you're ready to launch, you're already too late. And like, I a lot of times give that advice to somebody, but I actually have to get the advice from mentors like the opposite. Like, Greg, wait a little bit longer till you take action. So, I mean, there's always that balance you got to understand. But I think the reason why a lot of people don't take risks and say they're not prone to taking risk is they've never done the calculation of the risk. And so there's a famous story you love to tell that John Maxwell tells about a gentleman who walked up to John Maxwell after a speaking event and said, I want to do what you do for a living.
Yep.
He says, I understand you want to do what I do for a living, but do you want to do what I did to get here, right? And I'm probably butchering that up a little bit.
No, that's it.
But the key here is the price you want to pay. And so we talk a lot about this in our mastermind group. What's the price you're willing to pay, right? What's the price, the cost of discipleship to follow Christ? What's the price you're willing to pay? Here's the problem. When I say calculate it, there would be more entrepreneurs in this world if you could tell them exactly what that calculation is. I remember sitting in a room with my wife saying, we're going to take our entire life savings. We're going to dump it in this business based upon this dream, right? And I told her all the reasons why I felt led to do it. And I went through, her dad was an entrepreneur that left a big, nice job and started his own business. And so was my dad. We lived that life. We lived where, there was times where we had to pull back in some of the spending in our family and things we couldn't get because of the entrepreneurial life. But she still didn't fully understand it till 6 or 7 years later because you can't ultimately calculate the price. So calculated risk doesn't mean I know what the price is. It means I have an expectation of what the price is. So I think that a lot of people, when they start doing this calculated risk, they want to know. By definition, it's not risk if you know what it is. So you can give me all the probabilities in the world. It doesn't matter. Like, if I know that plane's going to go down, I'm not going to get in the plane. But there's a chance every time I get in a plane, even though it's the safest form of travel. By definition, it's risk. Risk is what you do not know. So when I say it's calculated risk, you just have an expectation of what could happen. So I think what I want leaders to hear out there is when you're afraid of taking risks, It's because you haven't looked at what the possibilities. What does paying a price? What could it possibly look like?
Yeah.
But you will never know until you pay the price. That question mark of what price. And so what you have to ask yourself, it's not a number, what price I'm willing to pay. It's what pain, what is my threshold of pain that I'm willing to endure? So I just talked to a leader last week that was talking about launching their own business. And I said, how passionate are you about that? And he said, well, I really like this. I didn't ask how knowledgeable you were. I didn't ask what skill sets you are. How passionate are you about this? If you literally get to the point where like you are frustrated every day and you hate what you're doing, are you so passionate about that purpose that you're going to go through it? That's what paying the price is. It's how much pain you're willing to endure. And that's what that entrepreneurial leap of faith felt like to me. You know, I could never completely quantify it, but my wife and I burned the boats.
Yeah.
And we said, we are going to do this no matter what the price we have to pay. That's what making that leap of faith feels like. And has it been easy? No. It has not. There's been many times I want to quit. Many times along the way. And I think that a lot of times you look at people that made the leap and you see them successful. I was just talking to a very successful business owner that has a business that a lot of people envy and telling me that times are so tough that he's not taking a pay from his business, that he's taking all these cuts. But from the outside, this person's had a business for 15 years that is, from all purposes, an unbelievable business. Gino Wickman always talks about the 10-year business cycle. You ever heard of that? So Gino Wickman talks about a 10-year business cycle. There's going to be 2 terrific years. Like, it's going to be unbelievable. I can't believe we blew our numbers out of the water. We don't know how we did it, right? There's going to be 6 good years or average years. And there's going to be 2 horrific years. Like, you're actually on the verge of bankruptcy. You're on the verge of collapsing. And it's almost like you can set your watch that over 10 years. You just don't know when they're going to come. Maybe those 2 come right away. For a lot of businesses, it was COVID in the last 10 years, right? The COVID shutdown. Yeah. You're going to have those. So how do you handle those 2 terrible years? That's the price you're going to pay.
Yeah, and Greg, I know you're, 6 or 7 years into this journey yourself, so it's not like you've been doing this for decades, but you mentioned there's many times that you've wanted to give up. And man, I see so many leaders give up way too early. In fact, I close every episode by saying the same thing. I said, leader, don't quit. Keep leading. The world desperately needs your leadership. And I absolutely believe that. The world needs more leaders who are tenacious and won't quit and will go to their finish line. What advice do you have for people, or maybe some practices you have in your life that have enabled you in those tough times where you do want to quit and throw in the towel? What's enabled you to push through those and get through?
Yeah, I mean, Doug, you know this, but was it 2 years ago, roughly? It was around Ash Wednesday, just how I remember when it was. I actually was physically curled up in a ball on my couch. Could not physically move. Not something I ever thought would happen to me. I had a panic attack. The weight of the vision of what I was trying to achieve in my business, I saw no way forward. And at that point in time, I was ready to throw in the towel. I was ready to give up running my own business. I was ready to go back to work for somebody else. The only way I got through that is first and foremost by the grace of God. So turning to God in those moments. My yoke may be heavy, but my burden is light when I give that yoke to God.
Yeah.
So that is first and foremost. And if you're not a person of faith, I would not want to be an entrepreneur. I always look at like funerals and people aren't of faith, and I just feel like bad for them.
Yeah.
Because how do you deal with that without God? So that's the first and foremost. But God gives us other gift, and it is people.
Yeah.
You know, I think that I had this point where I questioned my faith. And so during college, after college, there was a lot of pain in the church world for me. I'd seen a lot of bad things happen. And I said, organized religion's not for me. I'm just going to have a personal relationship with God and study and study and study. And I'm glad I went through that, by the way, because I think, one, if you don't question your faith, you don't have strong faith. But 2, it led me to study, like, what do I believe? Is it because of what I was taught? Or do I actually believe this? And I started studying all these different faiths, all these different traditions within my faith. And I realized one thing. All my faith told me was, was I have to be around other believers. I got to be around a community of people. I need a
Yes.
strong community. We
Yes.
weren't meant to do life alone. That's a quote that you say all the time that I always love to say is we were not meant to do life alone. That's actually the core value we just changed our team was together because we're meant to do life together. We do life together. We celebrate the wins together. We celebrate everything in life together. We also share our pains together, right? So the second thing so I got the grace of God. The second thing is people around me. And so when I was curled up on that couch, my wife immediately called one of my mentors. She didn't even hesitate. She said, you got to call Greg. So it was another business leader calling me to say, you know what, Greg? I've been in your shoes.
Wow.
And that's what it's been able. I have been able to build a community of other leaders that have been through the leadership pain, other entrepreneurs that have gone before me. I stand on the shoulder of giants is what my mentors always say. I totally agree with that. Like I've been able to build myself around with people. And it doesn't have to be somebody that created a Fortune 500 company. It doesn't even have to be somebody that created something. It could be a one-person business. Just somebody that understands the pain, is willing to listen, believe in you, and be your cheerleader. They have unconditional love for you. One of the big things we say on our team all the time, and this comes from my wife and I just did our top 50 most impactful meals. Right?
I love that, man. I love it.
Just to relive them, right?
Yeah. Oh, it's important.
I could go on and on about the importance, like the theme of a meal, and whether you believe in sacraments or not, but there's a reason why the sacrament is a meal, right? And it's just the power of being around other leaders. But you and I were blessed with a meal with Matt Keller. And you know exactly where it goes.
I do.
Well, it is my top.
Where did this make it? Yeah. Where's this in the top 50?
So much to my wife's chagrin, this was number one.
Yeah. Sorry, man.
Yeah. I mean, there was other things that like, and I talked to her. It wasn't like we had meals where we talked about our life goals and stuff, but there's just these certain sense of just like the vibrations happen. And so Matt Keller shares the comment, fully known, fully loved, and fully challenged. And that changed everything. And in our wall here, it's a big part of our mantra. It's part of our 412 vision for our company, is we want everyone to be fully known, fully loved, and fully challenged. And what happens is, and we go on about this in detail, but you usually get 2 of the 3, right? Yeah. And so what I want is mentors that fully love me, that no matter what, they love me for who I am, not because of the mistakes, not because of my identity, not because of anything else, that they fully love me. They fully know the pros of my life and the cons of my life. They know where I sin. They know my failures. And they fully challenge me. And that's what that mentor did. He loved me in that moment. He knew me in that moment. But he also challenged me in a moment. And that's the only way I would survive. Because I'll tell you right now, if I didn't have that, I'd be 6 feet under the ground right now as we speak.
Wow.
And so having God, 1, 2, but I'd be remiss when we talk about those people. The most important decision you make in your life, because I don't believe we decide to follow Christ, but we could have that conversation.
That's another podcast for another day.
So I think the most important decision in your life is who you marry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who God has yoked
100%.
you to. And so ultimately, that mentor was on that phone because my wife was there.
Yes.
That's how I got through that. And so building this company, my wife has given up and sacrificed so much. I would make the argument she's actually sacrificed more because the fulfillment I get, the passion that I'm following in my company gets me through those tough times. And I keep trying to put this in my wife's heart that I want her to start a mastermind for the spouses of entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Because it is just one of the toughest things in life to understand. And then if you work with your spouse as an entrepreneur, she talks about all the time, like she knows things about the company that she shouldn't because she's my spouse, right? And then like she has to go to these environments and what she has sacrificed to follow our dreams, to make the life that we want together. It's one of those things I always tell younger people, like whatever you do, pick a spouse that is your team member, because once God yokes you together, that's everything. It's more important than your children. It's more important than your business. It's more important than anything.
Yeah. I mean, mentor told me once, marriage is the closest thing to heaven or hell you'll ever experience on this earth. And he couldn't be more right. And
sometimes it's both, right?
Speak for yourself. I'm just joking. But I mean, even Think and Grow Rich with Napoleon Hill, like that is one of the key attributes. Like you have to have the right spouse. But even bigger than that, broader, like you said, it's all about community. It's one of our values here at L3, community. No leader should do life alone, but in community. And I remember reading a stat that really, again, part of me driving to build L3 leadership was hearing Henry Cloud say that he meets with executives all over the country. He believes 80% of leaders don't have one single, not a couple, one single person that they can confide in and that fully knows them, loves them, and challenges them. And I just want to say thank you personally. You've been a friend like that in my life. I don't always love the challenge part with you because you're
Sometimes
a challenge.
it's a capital C challenge, right?
Yeah. Greg's a challenger by nature, but you always speak the truth in love. And I know I could go to 100 other people and they may pat me on the back and say, great job, but you're actually going to give it to me straight, which I so appreciate. But beyond your spouse, can you just talk more about the power of being in a mastermind group? You've been in several kind of different groups. Why, I tell leaders, I believe every leader on the planet and their spouse, to your point, should be in a mastermind group. I've been in one for 10 years. It's been so helpful. Why are they important and what's been the impact on your life?
Yeah, I'm just going to start this with whatever leaders listen to this, find your tribe.
Yes.
Find your tribe and find it yesterday. I think the best explanation of masterminds ever goes back to Napoleon Hill. In his landmark work, we call it the gospel according to Napoleon Hill here, and Think and Grow Rich. But he talks about those vibrations. And we just had this moment, this is not a recency bias. I had multiple people talk about this. So we do our annual Beratung University, and you've been there almost every year, except for this year with travel and everything. But we sat around, there was this moment, and I very distinctively remember the moment, and I heard God's voice like, this is our tribe.
Wow.
And multiple leaders, the vibrations of your mind when you're around other leaders has a multiplication impact that is not easily able to be explained. But what we just talked about, that me curled up on the couch and the other down moments of my life, it's my mastermind, it's that tribe that helped me do this. So as I'm making these leaps of faith and I'm trying to calculate the risk, how do you calculate the risk without other people around you? Perception is reality. We judge every other person by their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intent. The only way to be judged by your actions is to surround you with a group of people that will fully know you, fully love you, and fully challenge you.
Yes.
It is one of the most important things we can do in our lives is to surround us. I don't care what you do for a living. I don't care if you're retired. I don't care if you don't view what you do as a vocation and you hate what you do. You have to have people around you. And I think this is important to mention. So my wife joined a mastermind group, right? And it was a thing where I asked her to do it. And I said, look, do it for 6 months. If it doesn't work, I'll do this other thing for you, right? We had a barter, right?
Yes.
And the reason why she didn't want to join, she's like, Greg, I have great friends that fully know and fully love me and fully challenge me. I don't want more friends. I said, there's a difference to your friends getting together versus a business meeting that you are around with the intent of fully knowing, fully loving, and fully challenged. It is just different. You could do it with your friends. I actually strongly believe you should not do it with your friends. Right? Maybe those people replace your friends. That's not here nor there. But you have to be around a setting where we are there for the implicit reason of fully knowing each other, fully loving, fully challenging. We could do small talk some other time, right?
Yeah.
We could go and have fun some other time. With our mastermind, we go and do retreats. With our mastermind, we go and do things that are fun together, right? Go on the boat, right? Go to Pirates games. Great stuff. There's time for that. But it's a business meeting. It's Doug Smith Incorporated. It's Greg Fuhr Incorporated. It is your board of directors of Doug Smith Incorporated. It's your board of directors. And I believe it so strongly, and you're the same way, I'm not just in one type of group like that. Yep. I'm in 5 groups like that because I kick it enough, right?
Yeah.
And then I have my own advisory board on top of that and other things that I do, and I'm always looking for that because with wise counsel, right? You have a bunch of wise counselors around you, your plans succeed, right?
Yeah.
And that's a play on the proverb right there, but it's the truth, and you can't make wise decisions. And so, yes, you want to launch at 80%. Yes, you want to launch at MVP, but how do you get to MVP at 80%?
Yeah.
And yes, mistakes are a gift, but if I could limit some of the mistakes and if I could learn from others' mistakes. But the last part I'm going to leave with this is you will never, ever know yourself as well as people outside of you. And that's why you need a mastermind, because nobody can do it alone. We were designed in our DNA to do life together.
Yeah, absolutely. And John Carter once said, most people don't lead their lives, they accept them. And similar to your point, most people don't even realize they're drifting through life. And, once you get a hold that you can live intentionally, that you can be more tomorrow than you were today, that you can actually have a life plan and think about what you want your life to look like at the end of your life. And every day can drive towards that. Like the excitement that brings and joy that brings into your life, and not just into your life, into your marriage. Someone once said that growth equals happiness. Like if you really want your life to be exciting, grow every day, grow in every area of your life. And once you start doing that, I guess this goes back to, our first meeting. You don't want to just sit around and talk about nothing. It's like, man, how can we grow? How can we get better? How can we make a bigger difference? And that's what makes true friendship so exciting. And this back and forth, because I know if I spend an hour with you at lunch, I'm going to be better as a result of it. And that is awesome.
Sometimes that's the fun.
Yeah.
Right? Don't get me wrong. I enjoy fun things, right?
Yeah.
I love going on a boat. You've been on a boat. But guess what? We're on a boat. What do we end up talking about? Growth and development, right? Because that's the thing, that's that vibration. When you get yourself around other people that think the same way, you can't help yourself. One of my mentors, we call it Solve the World's Problems. We get together once a month and we solve the world's problems, and it's kind of famous. Like my wife knows about it, his wife knows about it, our teams know about it, and we literally can't help ourselves. It's like one of my favorite dates on the calendar is when we get to go solve the world's problems, and we just can't, we literally don't talk about our personal lives much at all.
Yeah.
A lot of people I'm closest to, we don't know much about our personal life because we don't care, because it's that vibrations together, and we just want to whiteboard and we want to solve the world's problems, and we want to look at our businesses. How can we grow? Because ultimately we want to build stuff to have a better impact to change the world. Wow. And that's that to me is something that you can't get unless you design that intentionally.
That's such a fascinating subject for a conversation, man. I might need to add that to a date night for Laura and I with other couples. That's awesome. I want to dive more into intentional living. We've been talking about personal growth. In our mastermind groups, you mentioned we do retreats and things like that, and things that we try to introduce to leaders in mastermind group. A few things. One is journaling. I want to hear your journaling journey, and I'll end up asking 5 questions. So let's just stop here. I encourage everyone to journal. My mentor encouraged me to journal in 2004, Larry Betancourt. I thought it was a dumb idea, but I said, hey, I'll try it. It changed my life. And I know you had a similar reaction. So talk to me about your journaling journey, man.
Yeah, so I've journaled since I was young. There was a show called Doogie Howser, MD.
Yep.
And we had a Tandy, if anyone listens remembers a Tandy computer.
Nope.
That was very similar to what he did. We were my dad, for some reason, put money into technology to better ourselves. And we had a computer before, but it was this Tandy thing, and it was called Word Perfect, and it had this cursor. It looked like Doogie Howser, MD. And that's how I started journaling, because I wanted to be Doogie Howser, MD, okay? And then that journaling practice continued throughout my life sporadically. My grandfather died at that time. It was the toughest thing I'd ever dealt with. I journaled through that, right? Or sometimes I feel like God was wrestling something inside of me. I would journal through it. But it was never consistent. And every once in a while, I'd read a leadership book, I'm going to start journaling. I wouldn't do it. I tried journaling by hand. It didn't really work. And most of this, because of Doogie Howser, MD, was on the computer. So, Doug, at the point in time where we met, we started talking about journaling. I was like, Doug, I journal. I journal when I need to work through stuff, and it's all on Evernote, right? And you were like, what? You had your notebook, right? And I'm a big notebook guy. My dad was actually buried in his coffin with a yellow tablet because he was so famous for his yellow tablet.
I didn't know that. Wow,
yeah.
That's cool.
So that was a big thing.
Wow.
When you ask people, mom and dad, they always talk about the yellow tablet he always had. So it was ingrained in me, right? And I've just switched to Remarkable 2 years ago, which is probably, my wife refers to it as my my emotional support dog. I don't go anywhere without it.
I'm with you.
It's so important in my life. It's the same thing as yellow tablet, right? It's the same part. But you encouraged me to start doing it consistently and to start doing it in a notepad. And I remember being so I'm going to do this just to prove Doug is wrong.
Of course you would.
Right? I'm an Enneagram 8.
Yeah. Classic.
I literally wanted to do it to spite you, right? And so it transformed everything in my life. And I know distinctively when it started catching on was actually a spiritual retreat that we had together. And one of our mentors talked about different ways to hear God's voice. And that journaling I did in that retreat changed it to a habit. But regardless of whether you journal every day, and I think this is the thing, and we talk about, so there's a leader, I don't want to say their name, that a lot of people we know follow, that I can't stand. And the reason why is he's so formulaic.
Yeah.
So I always teach people, here's the way I journal, but be a first-rate version of yourself, not a second-rate version of me.
Yeah.
There's all different types of ways to journal.
Yes.
There's these 5-minute journal apps people use, whatever it is. The whole point of journaling is one thing and one thing only. It's to self-reflect. So I don't care if you do it on paper. I don't care if you voice record yourself.
Yeah.
But taking a moment to be still and look back at what you've done. Because what you remember without journaling is different than when you journal. So that's the reason why I think it's one of the best things you can do to grow as a leader, because it makes you sit down, reflect on your goals, reflect on what you've done, reflect on who you are. Am I the person that God's called me to be? Am I the person I want to be? And what do I want to change? Because those mistakes that we talked about, those mistakes that God gives us to empower us in our growth and development are useless if we don't journal through them.
Yes.
So I don't care if you do it where it's like I take 5 minutes at the end of the day, beginning of the day, notepad. I do believe in the power of handwritten. I mean, study after study keeps showing that it is much, much better to handwrite something than it is to type. And you can just Google that. I mean, there's so many studies on it. There's just the power of what it is. But it doesn't matter. It's that pause and reflect and looking back on things. So I have a blog on my website. If you want to see how I journal, it's in great detail. I've learned it over years, and I tweak it almost every year. And I add one thing to it because I'm journaling through. Does this work? Does this not work? But that journaling is so vitally important, and I encourage everyone. There's like 2 things I encourage everyone to try: affirmations and journaling, and try for 30 days. And if you come back and it doesn't work, you can punch me in the face, right? And so it does. It just works. It is so vitally important. And that journaling has led to one of the most life-changing things I've ever done.
Just going to jump in.
Great minds think alike.
Take it.
So that journaling led me to the thing I did next. And I actually just ran a group of leaders through this yesterday. And that's the annual report. And we know companies, right? I love us entrepreneurs all the time that do all these things for their business and they don't do it for their personal life.
Wow. Come
Right?
on.
It's like, oh, if you're doing that for Beratung, what are you doing for Greg Fear Incorporated? If you're doing that for L3 or Light of Life, what are you doing for Doug Smith Incorporated? So they make these annual reports for their business, but they don't make an annual report for themselves.
Yeah.
Now, my annual report, which by process, you can go read my blog about it, it takes 3 days. I'm actually about to extend it to 4 days to do. It didn't start that way.
Right.
And when I was encouraging these leaders, I said, just ask yourself 5 questions and take 10 minutes on a piece of paper. That's all it requires. Right? So I think it's so important, and I know you have your process that you use. I've taken a lot from your process and then adapted it. You know, my top 5 favorite restaurants is one of my favorite ones. My inner circle, you know, I look at my mentors and who's impacted my life that most, and then I write them a thank you card. I have this whole process I go through. But the key is you're sitting there at least once a year looking back. One of my favorite things to do is I use my personal Instagram. I post the things I want to remember from that year. That's the only things I post on my Instagram so that I can look at those little squares when I'm looking at my end of year report. I'm like, oh, that's when Abby first started skiing. Oh, this is when she did this. And this is when she did this, and having those memories to look back on. But it changes your, this is not a recency bias, but my last year end report was when I became from passionate about year end reviews to extremely passionate. 2023 was the worst year of my life. I didn't have anything crazy go on. I've had bigger pain points, but all in all, it was the first year. And you know, I've been setting goals since I was 5 years old. This is what my dad forced us to do. My daughter's 5. She set goals this year.
Come on.
Yeah, you got it, right?
We'll go there after this. I want to hit that.
But I think that's so important to reflect. So I was in a bad way. I was like, this year sucked because I did not make a single one of my goals that I set out for. But looking back on it, it gave me such gratitude because I looked at how God had built things for 2024. I looked at, I achieved more than I ever achieved in 1 year. Just wasn't what I set out to achieve. And I'm an intentional person, so that bothers me, right? But man, I'm like, it took that peak, or that valley of 2023 to get to the peak of 2024. It set me up. And I've never been more excited to enter a year than I was. And I would have not been that way hadn't I not done my annual review. The last part I think about annual reviews, I think we think about a lot of leaders talk about legacy. And we just had this a leader speak at Beratung University about leaving a legacy for your kids? Are your memories locked in your device? And have you created a video for your child to talk about the lessons you've learned? And have you been intentional about that? And one of the things that another person always says is, you're not dead until the last person alive stops whispering your name.
Wow.
And so that legacy you want to leave is not the money. We work with a lot of our clients that it's not about the money you want to leave, right?
Yeah.
Teach a man to fish, don't give him a fish. And so when you really start thinking about that, imagine your child reading your end of the year reports for 40 or 50 years of your life. Man, there's not a dollar sign in this world that I would give to read that for my dad.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't have them. And so that's what I want. And I want my daughter to read that I had a panic attack.
Yeah.
I want her to read my sins.
Absolutely.
I want her to learn from that.
Yeah.
Because we never learn from a leader that's perfect and polished. We learn from a leader that's pained. That's the American way, right? We want the underdog to win. And pain and suffering and that growth is what we want. And I want my daughter to read that.
Man, we have a mutual love for Clint Hurdle as a leader.
Oh,
former manager
top
of the
5
Pirates.
favorite leaders of all time.
All time.
Oh,
he's now on Instagram, which I know you're following him. I love this man. And he just started a series, which I'm like, I got to steal this. He has Friday Fails with Clint.
Yep.
Every week he shares a failure. And I'm like, that's way more powerful. And again, I'm someone who shares content and is usually sharing things that are practical. But I'm like, I could make more impact sharing one failure from this week than 100 posts on me just sharing tips and advice. I mean, really challenged by his vulnerability.
Gosh, I mean,
let's just have a Clint love fest.
There's the fact he joined Instagram. His reels have been amazing.
Yes.
I just learned why his jersey's number 13. I wear my custom Clint Hurdle jersey all the time.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, now I know why it's number 13. I was just like, oh my gosh. Next level. But you know what? There's a saying that my wife and I say. So Clint Hurdle, back when he was at the Pirates, he used to do these leadership talks. And there's a lot of cliche sayings we use from him. There's this crumpled up $20 bill we don't have time to get to. There's this 1 foot into tomorrow, 1 foot in yesterday, crap all over today. But one of my favorite sayings, my wife and I call each other out all the time, is be where your feet are. And he tells the whole story where he takes that bowl and he's like, Daddy's only allowed to answer the phone if Andrew McCutcheon or Bob Nutting call, or I think it was Frank Coonley back then was the president. But man, be where your feet are. If the amount of times my wife will say Clint, and that's what I know she's going to say it, right?
Wow.
Be where your feet are. But yeah, gosh.
That's so good, man.
If you're not following him on Instagram,
must. It's funny, man, the impact he's had on me. Every day I would do a 5-minute journal and I do affirmations. And it's like, what are you going to do to make today great? I write the same thing every day for the past 5 years. I'm going to be where my feet are. And the other thing, man, that I stole from him, he just signs all of his emails, make a difference today. I'm like, I do that now. And it's crazy, man.
Make a difference today. Love Clint. And I think this is important because this is really huge. My wife, joined our firm last year, and she always said this fully known, fully loved, fully challenged thing. She's like, Greg, you got to stop telling your team members you love them.
No.
And you and I, we tell each other we love them all. I mean, how many times? Every time you and I talk, hey, I love you, man. And I think that this love, and there's, 3 different types in Greek language, right?
Now we're going deep.
Well, but everyone wants to go it's filius love. No, I don't have brotherly love for you. I love you.
Yeah.
I have agape love for you. I love you unconditionally.
Yes.
And that's one of the things I've learned from Clint was he tells everyone on email, I love you.
Yeah.
And he's not ashamed of it. And why are we ashamed to tell our team members that we love them? I don't know why in Western society we've gotten rid of that. And my wife didn't understand it until she joined our team. And this is a person that loves to tell people she loves them.
Yeah.
And has fully embraced that. Because, man, with love, all things are possible. Because that's really the heart of the gospel.
Yeah.
The gospel boiled down is to God's unveiling love, unwavering love. Love is the gospel. And Clint is spreading that gospel. There's a famous saying that says, spread the gospel, use words only if necessary.
Yeah.
If we could just love others, and that's signing every email. I'm not to the point, I've tried to get my point where I'm going to sign every email, love Greg.
Yeah.
But I love that. When I see those emails, love Clint.
It's funny you said that, man. Now I'm going to have to say love Doug in every email, but I never saw that. So my email signatures, it's either make a difference today, keep making a difference, we're in this together, and now I'm going to have to put love Doug. But anyway, we're going to go on a whole Clint thing. We should probably move on.
We should do a Clint Hurdle podcast.
Yes.
But anyways.
And pause. I didn't check upfront contract. Do you have a hard stop time?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I just want to make
I had a meeting. I moved already. So.
Okay, we'll probably go 5-10 more minutes.
Whatever you want to do. It's your podcast. You just tell me. I'm along for the ride.
I don't know if that's helpful for Will.
No, just all you do is a long pause, and when they see the long pause, they'll catch it.
Okay, so we'll just pause for a minute and it'll go. Greg, several times throughout our conversation today, you brought up your dad, and I don't want to talk about parenting too. You talked about you were setting goals at 5 years old, and I was raised differently. I did not have that kind of upbringing. I didn't learn about intentional living till I was 18 years old, and man, I know through our relationship, man, you've been so blessed to have your dad and the parents that you did. I'll leave this open-ended before we start talking about parenting, but what was the impact that your dad's made on your life? It's okay.
That's a tough one for me to answer, right? I can't quantify. One of the things we talk about this all the time in our family. My dad was an eccentric person. But what I love about my dad was he was authentic. My dad sometimes could be a horrible human being because we're all sinners.
Yeah.
And he lived in that. And he had all these quirky sayings, right? People call them Cecilisms. I heard people call them Furisms. My team calls some of my Furisms like repetition leads to retention. That was not one of his, but one of his was like smarter than a rat. Doesn't even make sense. But the thing that I think that my dad did above and beyond, if I had to sum it, because one of the things I always say to leaders, like, what's the one thing? Like, let's blow it out. The one thing, if I had to summarize everything, it wasn't that my dad shared his faith and taught me the faith journey, because God would have got that to be some other way. It was that my dad did life with me together. So I always say to other leaders, they're like, how do you know as much you know about business at your age? I'm like, I got an MBA by the time I was 10.
Wow.
Because my dad, I was a mistake, or as my mom would call it a pleasant surprise, and my brother's like, that is a mistake, right?
Jeez.
But I was. And that
You
was
were a mistake to God, yes.
What a blessing it was, because my dad was in a different season of his life. We were just talking about this. I had a dinner with my brothers. My parents were in a different season of life than my brothers grew up in, and my sister grew up in. And we had different experiences. And it shaped us to very uniquely different people. And, there's this saying that we say all the time, more is caught than taught, more is caught than taught. I learned that originally from you, but it's become a Furism. Like, people get tired of me hearing saying it. And my dad did life together with me. Like, everything he did, I went. So when he went and was running the local Little League, I went to those meetings. When he was a township supervisor, I went to those meetings. I went to his staff meetings. I went in exam appointments with him. He was an eye doctor by trade. Was a serial entrepreneur, but like that was his main practice. And everything, we literally had eye doctors that would come in from around the country and would live with us for a week for no cost, just because he wanted to make them better eye doctors and just change the profession. And so then I would live, I was immersed in his life. It didn't matter if it was something stupid. It didn't matter a lot of times if I wanted to do it or not. I was doing everything with him, whether it was running to the grocery store, as my brother eulogized at the funeral. It's like I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning and went down and grabbed the newspaper. He always read 7 or 8 newspapers a day, and I was traveling there 75 miles per hour. He probably was, and he was swerving over because he would read the newspaper while driving. Right? Probably not the best safe vehicle for me to be in was my dad driving, but I was there by his side. So what I've tried to do with my daughter is involve her in everything. I'm a workaholic, and I'm working. So just last night, my wife was going out with her friends. My daughter, we had to spend time together. And I know there's a time to be where your feet are, but that was the only way we could work in our schedule, is I had to work from home. So I literally had her on my lap as I was doing things that I need to get accomplished. So yeah, I wish I could have spent more time with her, and I'm going to spend time with her this weekend. But if I'm not, and it goes to my wife. My wife's dad, who happened to also be in the same profession, he used to take her on Saturdays when we had to work. He would take her on client appointments. And so my wife sat in client appointments when she was 6 years old and 7 years old. Not to mention clients just like to see the little kid there, right? It's a huge benefit.
Yeah.
But man, we were immersed in that. So I've tried to take that and put it in my life. So my best parenting tip, I have 2 parenting tips I say to everyone. One, we're all going to screw up our kids. So screw them up the least amount possible, right?
Yes.
I think we
Yeah,
try to be perfect.
Yep.
Perfection is horrible.
Yeah.
I tell my wife all the time, be who you are, be authentic to who you are. Be the same way around my child as I'm around somebody else, right? Authentic in their life. But the second thing is, make your child involved in your life.
Yeah.
Everyone tries to be involved in their child's life. We had this in our mastermind. Somebody said this like a couple months ago. Imagine if you came in and said, I was caught in the act of praying. Right? Like let your children get caught in the act.
Yeah.
Man, I wrote that down. I made my, it's going to make my year review for 2024, but it's on my list. Let's get caught in the act of doing things.
Yes.
Because everything you do within reason, your child should be able to catch you in the act of. So yeah, my daughter gets my bad habits. I got some of my dad's bad habits. Guess what? They're authentic to who he is. So I think that my dad was the most impactful. So the last part I'll end this with, I was talking with a leader just a few weeks ago over dinner and didn't have the same upbringing I had. And we talked about it. The number one way to bring up the poor communities, the number one way to bring up the communities that need help. And I'm not talking about the United States, I'm talking about globally. John Maxwell's doing this globally, is to give them access to these same things. See, core values are about culture. Culture is a shared thing. Like, so when it's culture, it's what you do and others tell you to do in a shared tribe, right? So if we were riding the elevator down today, Doug, and you came in, you're facing the door, when I was facing the wall and just staring at you, you'd tell me to turn around. That's culture, right? There's certain perceived things. And what you don't know. And so if you didn't grow up going to business meetings, how do you know how to act at a business meeting? So the number one way we can help out people that didn't grow up the way we did is by mentoring and developing them and exposing them. That's what I try to do to my daughter. Expose her to my life.
Yes.
So go out and expose somebody. Don't just expose your children. Be a father or a mother of leaders and expose other people.
Well, you're firing me up, man. I mean, again, the way I phrase it is we have to show them another way, right? And so, you've talked about my story. My life got changed because my father-in-law and my youth pastor came into my life and they showed me an entirely different way modeled. Most people, even parenting, when we're talking about parenting, most people only see one model of what life should look like. And oftentimes it's not a great model. And so I couldn't agree more with you. And it's fun now that our kids are getting old enough even to have friends and hang out with friends. It's like, wow, we can have influence and show people, what it's like to live in our house and maybe, show some values there to friends and make disciples. It's really exciting.
Amen.
Well, hey, man, we have a few minutes left. We have to do part 2 because we need to dive into Beratung and everything you're doing here. But for fun, and again, for people watching this, you are the branding master. So I want to tell you about your company, but there's no one on the planet. I can pretty much say this with 100% confidence. There's no one on the planet that brands like you. I want to put a challenge out there to listeners. If you can name an item that should have a logo or brand on it, I guarantee that Greg has already thought of it and done it. So, but why do you do that? And talk about branding, because I think you do this masterfully and better than so many people.
Yeah, it's funny. The joke is how many places on me. So I got my socks on today. My wristwatch has it on. My cufflinks has it on. My jacket liner, my pens, my remarkable tablet, right? My belt. And there's probably a couple I'm missing. My AirPod case has it on it.
Underwear?
I do have branded underwear. Today's not the day I'm wearing it. I need to do some laundry.
Too good.
Branded Tommy Johns too. Life changing. But the reason why is, and I wrote a whole blog about this, so we don't have time. Somebody is really interested in this. But I got to go back to where I learned this from. And so there was a company that gave me a gift in another life. And it was this jacket I really loved. And I would wear it all the time. And so my wife had to meet the CFO of that company and was like, my husband wears this jacket all the time. And he goes, I know he does. She was like, what? He's like, everyone does. He's like, that's our strategy. So he's like, did you see our logo anywhere on that shirt? It was his jacket. She goes, no. He goes, it's in there. It's the same color as the jacket. It's down the bottom, so it's hidden. And he goes, it's not about seeing our logo. We bought the highest quality jacket that your husband would want to wear.
Yeah.
And not have our logo on it. So every time he wears it, he subconsciously thinks of it.
Yeah.
So our strategy is to buy high quality things we love, high quality things that we love that you wouldn't want to buy for yourself, that when you have it, you appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's how our branding strategy is to do that. The second part of it is what are called talk triggers, right? So if you're not a Scott McCain fan, talk triggers are basically something like, you don't just have a great meal and go out and talk about it. You have to have something in that meal that's different that causes you to talk about it.
Come on.
Right? So what is the difference maker? Like, you got the best service in the world. What triggers you to talk about it? So talk triggers. So we do all kinds of crazy things. Like, we make our own bourbon, right? People are like, they talk about it. We have a studio. I remember our one of the custodians of our building said, "What do you guys do for a living?" Because I'm cleaning a studio. I'm like, what is it you do? So those talk triggers. But I think the key thing here is that's all part of it. But why I constantly have our logo on it, and why our team always wearing our logo, is you would never question me. I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I'm a Pittsburgh Pirates fan. And most importantly, I'm a Pitt Panthers fan. That's why our companies are blue and gold. You would never question me if I was wearing a Pitt Panthers shirt today. You would never question me. You'd be like, that guy's a fan. See, a fan is a fanatic. And if our tribe, our culture, believes in our company, and they believe the impact we're having, we always say we're not sales. Like, if you were a doctor on a plane, somebody's having a heart attack, and you're like, is there a doctor? That's not sales. You're not going to like, hey, would you like to come to my practice so I can fix your heart? No, you just fix it. We believe so passionate in what we do, and we believe that our company's making a difference and an impact on the world so much that we're fanatical about it. We want to wear our logo because we want the whole world to know our tribe. People spend hundreds of dollars on NFL jerseys to show what tribe they belong to. They spend hundreds of dollars on NHL jerseys, unless you have a China connection, right? But they spend all this money on these jerseys because they want people to know their tribe. They want to know who they affiliate with. I have a cross necklace on. I want people to understand that I'm a Christian. That's my identity. So why am I not the same way about our logo? So that's why we brand everything. We're always looking for ways to brand. It's about our culture. We genuinely believe in the impact we're having, and others need us to solve their problems. So we're fanatical about our brand because we want others to know what tribe we belong to.
Yeah, it's so good. And as we start to wrap up, it's so funny we didn't even focus on what you do, but I think that's the whole point of Talking Points. People getting to know who you are is so important. And I think just like my first lunch with you when I said, man, there's something special about this guy, I think, everything that everyone just experienced through listening to this, people are feeling the same. But what do you actually do? And if people want to connect with you, man, how can they connect with everything you're doing here at Beratung? Because it's incredible.
Yeah, we didn't even get to touch on the goals, but I just help people pursue their goals is essentially what we do. And the way we do that is a thing called financial planning. And I say financial planning, and you have a certain perception in your head. It's as simple as this. We define what your goals are, your future self, what you want to be, your vision for the future. And we look at your resources you have. It could be your time, your talent, or your treasures. And we create a plan together. We bring those two together to get you a plan to get your preferred future. And that's what we do. We have the privilege and honor to work with people every day. We listen to them, we learn. We try to extrapolate their top 3 priorities of what they want to do in life, and we help them build a plan, and then we help hold them accountable to their plan to pursue those goals and live a fulfilling life. So if we mainly work, so our target market is busy working professionals. They're typically 35 to 55. They're typically 2 W-2 income earners. They typically make over $100,000 a year. They typically have 2 children. They typically want to own a second property to make family memories, or if they don't own a second property, there's some type of family memory mechanism. Maybe they want to travel the world to make family memories. And between going to soccer practice and between karate and between youth group, they're pushed and pulled in 100 different directions, and they just want somebody to partner with them. Just as we talked about, you need that mastermind group. They could do everything we do, but they want somebody to do the outside look. The hardest thing in the world to talk to your spouse about for most people is your finances.
Right.
And so the hardest thing to talk to my wife about is my finances. So you just need that third party to come in the room so that they can be the scapegoat and they can be like, oh man, that person was horrible. So that's what we work with. We do work with other people, but that's our target market. And that's why we've partnered so much with L3. We've been the sponsor of the podcast for I can't even remember how long, because
Thank you.
You guys
Should we do the ad right now?
But you guys do the same work we're doing.
Yeah.
It's about people are drifting through life.
Yes.
And they never sat down and just a simple question of where do you want to be? And we do this with all of our clients. Close your eyes. And we say it's 10 years from now. You wake up. What time does the alarm clock say? And we just go through this whole day like, what do you want your life to look like in 10 years? People don't think that way. They've never done that exercise. And so, okay, now we decide what we want to do. What do we do? And we start at 10 years, and we work our way back to 3 years. We work our way back to 1 year. Then we work our way down to 90-day goals, right? What can we do? What bites of that elephant? Instead of staring at that elephant, what bites can we take today to get us to where we want to be? You might not be where you want to be. Or if you are where you want to be, how do we stay there? So that's what we do to work with clients. It's a absolute privilege and an honor to do it. And it's, as you can tell, it's something I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so passionate about personal development, because it's the same thing we do. It's one part of personal development that we do. We help people understand their goals, the person that they were called to be, and help them get there.
Yeah, and this is huge. And the whole time, I mean, the theme throughout this conversation is community. You need a community around you. And yes, you need a phenomenal spouse. Yes, you need to be in a mastermind group with peers who can challenge you. But the older I get, the more I recognize everyone also needs a coaches, and not just a coach, not just a life coach, that there's one, like, you need coaches in every area of your life. And what I love about what Greg's saying, it's not just, hey, just come in and let's talk about your 401k. No, it's way, way bigger than that. And hopefully you've heard through the wisdom that Greg shared today, it's like he is bringing a wealth, and same with everyone that works for him, because I know his team, they bring such a wealth of information about life and helping you get there, and they care about you. And so again, you can have great general conversations and mastermind groups and get challenged here and there. But again, if you have a coach in your corner, people who are going to come through you and walk you through even the tough times, like, you need that. And I can't think of a more important area than finance, but because it touches every area of your life. And so again, just knowing Greg, I can't encourage you enough. If you're in need of that, or you've never had that, reach out to Beratung. We'll include links to everything, and just do a call with one of their team members and see what happens.
I don't know who needs to hear this out here, but I think the number one thing that stops somebody from hiring a financial planner is they think they're not there yet. So we literally just had somebody who was 19 years old come to our firm and hire us. You do not need to have any money. We have clients of ours, we don't manage their money. We are paid as certified financial planning professionals to build financial plans. For as little as $200 a month,
Wow.
you could come. And so that's like, most people can afford a cell phone bill. And why I say this is, it's access. I don't want to work with people that have already been climbed the mountain.
Yep.
I want to help you climb the mountain. I want to partner with you because you deserve it. You need that. Let's get you to that mountain. Because I always say this to some of my other friends in the industry, hey, I'm glad you're helping rich people get richer. I hope you sleep at night, because that's just not who I am, right?
Come on.
Like, Chad would come back to me and say something else about that. But, you know, I like, that's who I want to work with. Yeah. I want to work with those people that are that emerging leader that just wants help to get there. Let's partner with you. So whether it's Beratung, I don't care who you use, get a financial plan.
Yeah.
And I want you to hear this. You don't need to be a millionaire. You don't need to have lots of money. You can hire somebody to build a plan, just like you can hire a personal coach, just like you can hire a fitness coach. You can hire a coach for every part of your life. So if you're not where you want to be, let's help build your goals there.
Yeah, and I hope everyone heard Greg's heart. And again, I don't know much about the industry, but my understanding is a lot of financial planners in general, quote unquote, don't make money unless you have X amount to put down, et cetera. And so for your willingness to come alongside people where they're at, it's the same thing. It also sounds like it's just part of your dad's legacy. It's just like, you want to bring people along for the journey, man. You've been blessed to have people who have brought you to where you are today, and you want to do the same thing for others. And that's our exact heart at L3. I'll just leave this open-ended as we close. What do you want to leave leaders with today? You can go any direction you want.
Wow. So, you know, you always do the lightning round questions, right?
Oh, do you want to hit them? We have time.
Oh, yeah, we could hit those. I was just going to pull one from the lightning round, but yeah, you want to do lightning round?
I do want to do the lightning round.
Do you want to pause and just...
As long as they're lightning round for you.
Let's so we'll do a pause.
Yeah.
So why don't you do, as we're closing here,
Yeah.
and then whatever camera you had them on, switch the camera. All right. So
And then I'll go back and I will leave it open-ended at the end. So.
All right.
Well, hey, with the 3 or 4 minutes that we have left, I want to dive into the lightning round. Bunch of fun questions I ask every leader at the end of every interview. And the first one is, what is the best advice you've ever received, and who gave it to you?
So I really struggle with this one, right? Because I have been blessed with so much great advice, right? And so I think that the one I'm going to say, and this is going to be, it's going to sound like a cop-out, but trust in the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul. Because that's it.
Yeah.
That advice came from the Bible. It wasn't a leader, right? It was the Bible. But I think that's the best advice I've ever given. And every other advice hinges from that.
If it's not the same answer, if you could put a quote on a billboard for everyone to read, what would it say?
Yeah, and this is hard for me because there's a lot of things I'd want to say, but I think in the context of it's got to hit on a billboard. So it's just simple as this: leaders are readers. Man, if you could just read, you have access to all the wealth and knowledge in the entire world. And so leaders are readers. There's so many other quotes that are more important to me, so many other things that hit me. My secondary one, it was really hard for me.
I knew you had to sneak another
well,
one.
I had to say this, was day-to-day intensity.
Come on.
Week-to-week consistency. month to month, builds championships. Came from your football coach.
Yep.
It's one of my favorite sayings of all time. But I just don't think it hits as well on a billboard because you got to ride past. Because that was my original answer. And I'm like, no, that doesn't hit. Leaders are readers, short, sweet, to the point.
Kudos to Jim Rankin, North Allegheny football high school coach, years ago. You talked about leaders are readers. It was funny. I was doing my self-guided tour of Beratung's offices here. And I never saw this before. You have an entire poster of, you call it I don't even know what you would call it. It's a list of 10,000 books people need to read.
No, it's 380 right now. We're going to add to it, but it is the Beratung Canon, and you can just Google that, Beratung Canon, and so the Bible Canon, right? So one of the things we do is we try to express our faith. So throughout the history of the faith, there's been ways where we've taken things that were pagan and made them Christian. Look no further than the Christian Christmas tree. The Celtic cross has a hole in the middle, so when you're worshiping the sun, you have to look at the cross, right? So we try to take things in our work life. So the Bible Canon, understand how the Bible canons mix. So we actually have a Bible Canon. And it starts out with our 4 Gospels, and those are to be read the first year you're here, and expected to be read at least annually.
So just for time's sake, because we could go through the whole 380, what are 2 or 3 books from that
So let's go
are
with the 4
must-reads?
Gospels. So the first 4. So it just actually started in our mastermind. The whole idea, there's a lot of ideas, but we always refer to it as the Gospel according to Chris Voss. Right, so which is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I tend to read that about 5 to 8 times a year. I've gone through his master class multiple times. Just did it again a couple weeks ago. So it starts with Traction First by Gino Wickman.
Yeah.
That's the first gospel you read. That is the most important book for our company. The amount of times I've read that would blow your mind. The second one we ask people to read is Think and Grow Rich. The gentleman who ran a firm I started with said, if you want to be successful in life, read it 34 times, or if my wife would say, marry somebody who's read it 34 times. Lord knows how many times he's read it now.
I love
but I'm way over 30 times on that one. And I say go back to the original. It's horrible language. But that's part of it. I want to go to the source script. The third one is 7 Habits, which is Stephen Covey's masterpiece. That was the book that was pounded in my head as a child. It's been one of the most formative books in my life. And then you have Never Split the Difference or our Gospels. If you want to read more about it, we have the whole Beratung Canon. But I think the thing is, we use the canon not only to give the order of what our leaders should read, but to also teach our faith. But the key is, the Bible's not in our canon. And when you ask what's the book that's most powerful, the Bible is. Right. But the Bible transcends all that. The Bible should be read daily, studied at least weekly, right? Yeah. It should be meditated on. These other books are supplemental. And without the Bible, all these other books are useless as far as I'm concerned.
You can spend time with a lot of great leaders. As you mentioned, we've had a lot of great dinners with leaders, even together. Do you have a go-to question that you always ask when you get to spend time with someone great?
Yeah, and so the go-to question is, what's the one thing? And then I change it based upon that leader, what I want to learn from them. So I was with one mentor, you grew this business from $2 million to $20 million. What's if you had to pick one thing that caused it to happen? And so it's not a cop-out, it's the truth. So if it's whatever I want to extrapolate from that leader, because whatever they're an expert in is what I want to learn. So I always do the one thing, what it forces them to think through, and the answers I get. So it's whatever you want to learn from that person. If it's Doug, what's the one thing that made this podcast successful? What is the one thing?
Right. Biggest leadership pet peeve, and only one, because I'm sure you could be here for the next hour.
Yeah, this is an easy one for me. It's selfish leaders. Leaders are servants. And so my team knows this. If I go to a building and the leader's parked in front of the building, I don't even want to talk to them. if their name's the first thing on their website, I don't want to talk to them. Wow. A leader is a servant. And man, I just hate selfish leaders that are in it for themselves, because it's all throughout the Bible. You actually, more is expected of you.
Yeah.
And you have a sacred honor as being a leader, enriching people's lives. So I hate selfish leaders.
What's something you've done in your life or experience that you think everyone should do before they die?
Oh, there's so many things, but
one.
I know, right? That's tough, right?
Yeah.
I think it's just like a cop-out, but experience something great with your child. So for me, it's skiing with my daughter, but pick one activity with your child that you would love to do, and make it something you both enjoy, not something you just enjoy. I think the moments I've had skiing with my daughter are my favorite moments in life.
Wow.
So I've been blessed to do a lot of cool things, but I think that's what it is. Do something with your child.
If you could go back and have coffee with Greg Fear at any age, and you would have actually listened to yourself, which I'm sure you wouldn't have, what age would that be, and what would you tell that version of Greg?
Yeah, I think it would be somewhere around 22 to 24. As you know, I was extremely involved, extremely driven, like the age of 14. And at one point in time, I was elected official, like 21, do all that stuff. But I think the thing I would say is there's that one every leader I've ever heard this podcast say is slow down, like it's going to take time. That's true, but I think it's a different view of this. Your passions will change over time, just like taste buds. So at that time, my number one focus from probably age 8 to 22 was to become a state senator. I'm not saying never, because passions will change, but in my current lot in life, I would never do that. It could be offered to me. I don't want to do that. And so as those things change, just like what our clients, our financial plans change, you have to alter the course. And so I go back and like, man, if I could have not taken that trip with my buddies to go do that and taken that trip with my daughter, my wife now,
wow,
how much more impactful would it be? So I'm always about burn the boats, but sometimes you got to have dry powder to follow and pursue your other passions. I wouldn't have been able to start my company if I didn't save money and have dry powder. And so I wish if I go back in time that I would hold some stuff back for future passions, because your passions will change.
Yeah. You mentioned your dad's legacy in the Yellow Notebook, which I love. One day, man, we're all going to leave this planet. And when you do, what do you want your legacy to be?
Yeah, it's as simple. This is something that God spoke to me on a spiritual retreat you and I were in, is I want to be a father of leaders. And so I want to have generational impact. I want to have the leaders that I develop other leaders, that develop other leaders, that develop other leaders. So there's a great Carrie Job song called The Blessing. And I used to actually hate it. And now it's one of my favorite worship songs the same. And I hate it because the priestly blessing from Numbers is one of my favorite parts of the Bible. I was like, she's butchering it, right? But there's this point in there, and it's one of my favorite worship songs. She goes, may this blessing be on your children.
Yes.
And their children.
Yeah.
And their children. And their children. She just starts going, sometimes I'm just like, and their children. And it's a big part of what we try to do is we try to work with every one of our clients' children and their children and their children and their children. And so I want a legacy for my child, but that's not my focus. Because if I do this, the legacy will be there for my child. I want leaders that grow and develop other leaders, because the impact we can have in this world would be exponential.
Yeah, well, and again, I just want to say thank you. I don't know if I'd consider you a father, but you've certainly been a brother and a friend. And man, my leadership is so much better in my personal life and in my work life because of your friendship. And so I'd like to say that I'm part of that legacy already. And man, thank you for investing in L3 leadership through the conference, through the podcast, and everyone that we're able to. We're going to have 300 leaders in the room in 2 weeks. Every single one of those that gets touched, like you have a part to play in their legacy. And I'm just one person that you're influencing out of. I can't even imagine how many. So just thank you.
L3's had that legacy. I mean, we wouldn't have my daughter if it wasn't for L3.
Maybe we'll just end right there. Anything else you want to leave leaders with?
No, I think
I
that.
can't go there.
But that's true. But I think if I had to say one thing to leaders, right? Just do it. Stop thinking. Just do it.
Greg Fuhr, it was an honor. We'll have to do this again, man. We'll have like 10 parts. This was awesome. Thanks.
Appreciate you, brother.
Hey, leader, and thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Greg. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did, and you can find ways to connect with him and links to everything we discussed in the show notes. I also want to thank our sponsor, Andosha Marketing Solutions. They are the producers of this podcast, and if you are looking for help with your organization's marketing, I cannot recommend them enough. Check them out at andosha.com. That's ANDOCIA.com. And as always, leader, I like to end every episode with a quote, and today I'll quote Harvey Firestone, who said this. He said, "The growth and development of people is the highest calling of leadership," and I could not agree more. Well, that's going to wrap up today's podcast. As always, leader, remember, don't quit. Keep leading. The world desperately needs your leadership. I'll talk to you next episode.